both sides hindi lugi. Hindi lugi yung ship owners, hindi lugi yung seafarers. Nasa gitna tayo at everybody happy. Ika nga.
We are in the period of interpellations and debate. With that, I move to resume the period of interpellation and recognize the distinguished gentleman from the province of Isabela and Davao, the sponsor of the measure, Sen.Raffy Tulfo, and to interpellate our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. So move, Mr. President.
First of all, let me congratulate our sponsor for filing and reporting out this visionary bill, Mr. President. Finally, a Magna Carta for our seafarers. And the purpose of our interpellation actually is to make sure that there would be no what we call unintended consequences flowing out from the words which we use in the bill or in the law. To really make sure that our Filipino seafarers benefit from this Magna Carta. Narinig ko rin naman na from our sponsor na para sa kanila ito. Siguraduhin natin na mananatiling para sa kanila at talagang makikinabang sila. So, with this introductory statement, Mr. President, if our sponsor can allow me now to commence with our interpellation, Mr. President.
We're talking here, Mr. President, Your Honor, about ocean-going vessels, which means those are the international seafarers. While the domestic seafarers are referred to those vessels carrying Philippine flagship and plying domestic routes. They are the ones that are considered as domestic seafarers. But under the Magna Carta that we are trying to come up with here, it helps and refers to both the international and the domestic seafarers. Both will benefit.
Yes, both nga. So, does this mean that we are making subject to Philippine law the ship owners of those foreign registered ocean-going vessels, Mr. President?
As far as domestic seafarers, well, they should be subject to our Philippine law. We have the DOLE, we have the Marina, and all other domestic laws that cover domestic seafarers. On the international law, the flagship of that country where the seafarer is employed in that ship will be responsible in implementing the MLC, the Maritime Labor Convention of 2006. And when there's a problem with the seafarer on that particular ship, so during the port of call of that country, and make sure that the seafarer on that ship, Filipino seafarer, will be protected, given all the rights that is mentioned in the MLC of 2000.
So when we, for the Filipino seafarer who is on that international ocean-going vessel, when we want to help him invoke his rights, we communicate with the other country in the port of call, invoking the MLC 2006, which is the International Convention, or invoking our particular law?
Okay, there are 140 countries who is members or signatories in the MLC of 2006, and all of them are in compliance, Your Honor, Mr. President, doon sa MLC, na kung ano po yung mga nakasaad doon sa MLC. Whatever country or whatever flags that ship carries, then automatically he or she is protected. Kasi nga po, in compliance, halos lahat ng mga vessels na kung saan meron tayong mga seafarers. And they have to comply with that MLC convention dahil nga signatory po sila.
Does it mean that our bill implements MLC 2006, Mr. President?
Yes, that is correct. We are compliant with what is stated in the MLC of 2006, Mr. President, and Your Honor, same as all the other countries, most of them, 140 of them, as a matter of fact, signatories to MLC convention.
Okay, what would be the important points of MLC 2006 which are also captured and reproduced in our Magna Carta, Mr. President.
That is correct, Your Honor. Kasi doon sa MLC, Your Honor, meron pa kasing standard na sinusunod, and all countries, like I said, signatory to that. So, kailangan nila sumunod kung ano na pag-usapan doon. And kasama na rin po dito sa Magna Carta, lahat ng mga batas na nakasaad doon sa MLC Convention, nandito rin nakasulat sa ating Magna Carta for seafarers.
Yes, Mr. President, can we have, let's say, the top 3 ideas in MLC 2006 which are also found in our Magna Carta?
Yes, Mr. President, actually I have 6 areas.
6, okay po.
Yes, so dito po sa Chapter 3, Section 5, dito naka-state, specify yung mga rights po ng mga seafarers. Nandiyan yung right to just terms and condition of works, right to self-organization, collective bargaining, right to educational advancement and training at reasonable, affordable cost, and rights to information of seafarers' family, of next of kin, etc.
So at least yung MLC 2006 enumerates or lists down rights of seafarers. And did we make sure that all of those rights mentioned in MLC 2006 are reproduced or restated in our Magna Carta? 100%? Wala tayong inomit 100%, at meron din ba tayong dinagdag sa ating
Yes,
local
Mr.
version?
President.
Opo.
Well, whether we like it or not, it's automatic that we have to adapt whatever stated on the MLC Convention, because we are a member of that, Mr. President. We are signatory to that, and so we have to abide to it. But we have added something on it para naman doon sa ating mga local seafarers. So para
local.
pinagbubuo. So kasi Mr. President, kung tayo magpo-focus lamang para sa ating mga international seafarers, then para may discrimination naman, para naman yung ating mga domestic seafarers. So pinagkaisa na yon dito sa Magna Carta for Seafarers.
Then did we lift the wording of the MLC 2006 and then we restated it in the Magna Carta? Because takot ako sa ganyang approach, because we might incorrectly restate, because the easier version would be for our bill to refer to MLC 2006, if that is our intention, that we will simply reproduce rights found in MLC 2006 in domestic law.
Like I said, Mr. President, Your Honor, since we are a member country of the MLC Convention and we ratified back in 2012, so lahat po ng provision na nakalagay doon sa MLC, we should be in compliance to that,
Yeah.
and we should abide with that, kung ano man yung nakasulat doon, ano man napagragihan doon. So, therefore, dito sa ating Magna Carta, it goes without saying na lahat na nakasulat doon, matik na
Reproduce po natin pala. Opo.
Exactly, Mr.
So yun yung approach natin.
Yes,
Instead of just merely citing the convention.
that is correct, Mr. President.
Apo.
Matik
Sige.
na yun.
Okay po. Thank you po. So I noticed the outline of the bill. So there's a particular chapter na only for domestic seafarers, which led to some confusion within our ranks. No, so does this mean that it is only that chapter which is not applicable to international seafarers, or does it mean that it is only that chapter which is applicable to domestic seafarers?
That's right, kung na-notice niyo po, Mr. President, Your Honor, like I said kanina, kailangan isama natin dito yung domestic seafarers dito sa Magna Carta, because they're also considered as seafarers. Kasi kung ilalagay natin dito pang international at wala silang chapter dito, then they might see na they're being discriminated against. So sinama natin sila dito, but they have an exclusive chapter only for them. But still, they're recognized internationally as seafarers, and that's why we have this Magna Carta na sinama sila as well.
Okay, so the Magna Carta for seafarers, when this becomes law, when we read it, it's applicable to both domestic and international seafarers, the entirety of the law. Except that there's also a chapter just for domestic seafarers, in
That is-
addition to the rest of the law.
That is correct.
Okay. But how will we operationalize this, Mr. President? Let us say, merong paglabag sa ating batas, itong Magna Carta, and then, siyempre, ang lumabag ay yung foreign registered ocean-going vessel. Therefore, ang most likely, ang ship owner niyan ay foreigner. So,
That's right.
paano po natin siya mapapanagot sa paglabag sa batas or masisingil kung meron man pong siyang utang sa ating seafarer?
Okay, if we're talking about utang, Mr. President, na hindi nababayaran ng, say, yung flagship vessel, sabi mo nga na foreign, yung sa ating seafarer, then we go after the manning agency because the seafarer was hired through the manning agency. Mr. President, Your Honor.
Okay, so the manning agency naman is definitely based and present here in the Philippines. Ganun po ba yun?
That is correct, Your Honor, Mr. President.
So, ahente siya. That is the agent of the
Ship owner.
principal who is the ship owner. But then what is their liability, Mr. President, under the law? Kung may paglabag ng batas, yung solidary ba ang liability ni ship owner at saka ni manning agent or agency?
That is correct, Mr. President. Kung ano yung liability ng ship owner, ganun din yung liability ng manning agency. Both of them are liable doon po sa kung anumang paglabag o anumang pwedeng may claim ng ating seafarer against them.
Automatic yun. Yun ang automatic.
Automatic po yun.
Automatic. Okay po.
Mr. President.
Ngayon po, ito pong sa hearing po ba natin sa panukalang ito, meron bang nag-oppose sa ating panukala?
Wala, Mr. President, pero doon sa technical working group, I talked to several stakeholders, kasama na dyan yung DMW, kasama yung OWA, kasama yung NLRC, kasama yung mga malalaking union. At first, meron pong mga pagtututol and then they told me ahead of time na ayaw nila ng tinatawag na escrow provision.
As escrow.
Yeah, and when I told them na hindi magkakaroon ng escrow provision, yung Magna Carta for Seafarer, this bill, that they make some suggestions na para naman in exchange doon sa escrow na provision na para wala pa rin talagang escrow. So, the thing here, Mr. President, na naintindihan ko po kung bakit marami sa mga agency na nagre-request kailan malagyan ng escrow kasi malaki ng kalugian daw nila. Umabot as a matter of fact to 2-point-something billion pesos yung mga nanalo sila pagdating sa Supreme Court sa kaso. And so, pag kailangan ng magbalik ng pera ang seafarer, wala na silang pera, doon sila nakakalugi. And then these manning agents are telling na kung ganun rin lang, there's that possibility na ito mga ship owners might no longer hire Filipino seafarers as a result. So ang nakikita ko talaga, the root of the problem really is the ambulance chasers. So dito sa Magna Carta natin, it will be focusing more on how we can stop these ambulance chasers from operating and victimizing our seafarers.
Ito po ang ating bill, draft ng bill natin. Wala naman ako nakitang escrow provision. Kaya wala akong tanong tungkol sa escrow provision kasi wala sa Senate draft yon.
Precisely.
Tayo ba, binibigyan ba tayo ng garantiya ng ating sponsor na sa period ng amendments, wala po tayong kaplano-plano na maibalik or mailagay ang isang escrow provision?
Like I said earlier, Mr. President, naintindihan ko po kung bakit maraming gusto magkaroon ng escrow provision dyan. In fact, the Congress version would say that there should be an escrow provision to protect naman siguro yung business interest ng mga ship owners, maging yung mga manning agencies na later on kapag patuloy silang nalulugi, hindi sila nakapag-claim or hindi sila nababayaran after na manalo sila sa Supreme Court, then there's that possibility na they might withdraw their interest in hiring Filipino seafarers. That's why nakita ko na yung problema. The root of the problem talaga, Mr. President, is pagdating po doon sa grading system ng disability. So na-address ko na yan, nakita ko yung problem na yan, how we can go about that, and I told that nung magkaroon kami ng TWG doon sa mga stakeholders at sila ay napahanga. Sila ay nag-suggest at the same time, and then we talk about the way na para masiguro na wala talagang escrow. Zero, nada, zip.
Tama po yun. At I will confirm that. Sa inaral ko na version natin, walang escrow.
Wala.
So,
But at the same time na hindi rin po malulugi yung mga money agency. We also have to protect their interests. We also have to protect their business. Kasi po, they were there to make
So,
money para magkaroon ng negosyo. Pero ayaw na natin sila na mabankrupt naman or ayaw natin sila na umatras later on just because tulad ng tingin nila sa atin. I mean, tingin nila sa atin na pag kinuha namin itong mga seafarers na Pilipino, baka magbibigyan sakit sa ulo. So why hire them? We should be hiring other seafarers from other countries na lang. Pero dito sa Magna Carta natin, doon sa period of amendments, I will show you how we'll do it na zero talaga yung escrow provision. Wala talaga. Zero, nada, zip.
Apo. Kaya nga, if we don't amend it towards putting that, wala talaga eh. So tama, this representation agrees with the bill in the sense.
And I already promised that to Senator Riza on the various, and I'll stand by it at talaga until the end.
Yes.
Wala talagang escrow.
But then our sponsor has mentioned that he has found the solution. It's in the grading system of disability. Wala pa ngayon dyan. It will be introduced in the period of amendments.
Exactly,
Kasi
Mr. President.
wala rin ako na-encounter na ganun po sa
Correct.
pag-aaral ko.
Correct. Doon sa period of amendment, it will be explained how are we gonna do it and make it possible na hindi magkakaroon ng provision and yet both sides hindi lugi. Hindi lugi yung ship owners, hindi lugi yung seafarers. Nasa gitna tayo at everybody happy. Ika nga.
Medyo ako lang po, this representation ay parang nagtataka ako bakit natin in-exclude po ang fishing vessels. Bakit po natin sila tinanggal? Bakit nila sila itinuturing na seafarers?
Okay, thank you, Mr. President and Your Honor, for that very nice question. They are excluded because they're covered under a different convention, Your Honor. Yun yung tinatawag nating Convention 188 of the International Labor Organization, of 2007, when they are being recognized as seafarer, pero mas iba ang designation nila pagdating sa batas tungkol sa maritime labor law.
Pero yung mga karapatan po na naisip natin for our seafarers na nilagay natin sa Magna Carta for seafarers, okay lang ba na i-extend din natin sa kanila? Wala naman siguro masama na i-cover din natin sila, Mr. President.
That's a very nice suggestion, Mr. President. We'll think about it. But so far, right now, much better kung hiwalay na lang natin sila dahil para hindi na magkaroon ng confusion because we have the MLC that really covers the international seafarers, excluding the fishermen in fishing vessels because they're covered under the Convention of 188 of ILO of 2007 para hindi magkaroon ng confusion. That's why right now they separated sila. Pero that's a good suggestion. We'll look into it, Mr. President.
Yes, especially Mr. President, kasi ganitong nakikita ko po, si MLC 2006, ang counterpart local law niya would be this one. Itong ating pinag-uusapan, the Magna Carta for seafarers.
That is
How about si Convention 188? Meron na ba siyang counterpart local law? Kasi kung wala pa, there will really be a void or a gap, Mr. President, unless the sponsor is telling us that these conventions are self-executing in Philippine territory. But I think we need to pass enabling laws to implement them.
Okay, yung sa ILO of 2007, Mr. President, we're talking about fishermen on that are deployed on international vessels. Now, doon sa mga fishing vessels natin na domestic, then they are covered under the Philippine law na meron tayo nandiyan yung DOLE, na meron tayong mga provisions sa ating batas na they are also protected.
But not necessarily the Magna Carta. Kung ito panukala ay maging batas, does this cover our domestic fishers?
No, Mr. President.
No, it would be...
Because yung seafarers, unique kasi they're for commerce and trade. When you say seafarers, they're more than commerce and trade. These seafarers onboard a ocean-going vessels, whereas ito pong mga fishermen, sila ay, the purpose of them is to go fishing, and then after a day or two, they'll come back to shore para i-unload yung kanilang mga isda, and then they go back again sa sea. Whereas yung mga seafarers natin, yung sinasabing international seafarers or domestic, international seafarers, they go out to their whatever the destination is, and it will take weeks and even months before na sila ay makabalik dito sa Pilipinas, Mr. President, after they finish the contract.
So ito pong definition ng seafarer na nasa DNW Act na babasahin ko po na, it shall include fishers on board commercial fishing vessels on international waters. Ang naiisip pala nito ay yung pong sinabi nating sponsor na after a few days, babalik na sila sa Pilipinas. Ganun po ba yun?
Yung sinasabi ko, Mr. President, I'm just trying to differentiate yung mga fishermen versus yung mga seafarers on ocean-going vessels. Kasi sa mga mangingisda, pupunta sila sa laot, and then babalik ulit sa shore, and then pupunta sa laot. Whereas ito mga international seafarers, they're on duty, doon sila sa barko nila for weeks and weeks and weeks, and even months.
Okay.
Pero
yung mga fishers po na nabanggit natin ay pwedeng bumalik na sila sa shore, pero that is still outside of the Philippines. Nasa labas pa rin po sila ng ating bansa.
okay,
Tama
so
po?
you talk,
Pwede, posible. There are fishers like this, Filipino fishermen, like, or fishers, as the word is used in the DMW Act. Posible ganun, they are on board a commercial fishing vessel on international waters,
yes.
and then when they report to their station, that is land, but that land can still be a foreign country.
Okay.
Posible po.
I think this was several weeks ago, Mr. President, when we met with some Japanese diplomats in a hotel. I forget which hotel is that, and they did mention to us, na marami raw mga Filipino seafarers sa mga fishing vessels sa Japan. Okay, so they are considered as seafarers, but they are covered differently. I see where you're coming from, Mr. President, Your Honor, and I understand that. Maybe that needs to be studied, like you said, maybe for consideration later on in the future. Pero hindi kaya po ng fishing industry ang MLC standards.
Yeah.
Mas higher po kasi yung MLC standards versus yung standards na nakalaan po para doon sa mga fishermen. Doon po sa tinatawag natin na 188 Convention of ILO. So those are two different animals, Mr. President.
Anyway, as written, it's very clear kasi sinabi rito except eh. So ang approach po ba natin dito sa coverage ng ating Magna Carta is tayo ba'y nakatingin sa nationality ni seafarer or sa nature ng vessel?
Okay.
Saan po, ano po yung mas, ano yung tawag doon, na critical factor po? Opo.
We're not looking at the nationality of the seafarer, Mr. President, Your Honor, kasi very clear dito na ang coverage lang nito ay para sa mga Filipino seafarers. Hindi na po natin problemahin, intindihin yung mga seafarers from other countries because they have their own Magna Carta, they have their own rules and laws that protect their citizens ng mga countries na yon, Mr. President, Your Honor.
So, if there is a foreigner on board a Philippine registered domestic ship, what law governs the rights of the foreigner?
We do not accept foreigners in our vessels, ocean-going vessels, Mr. President, because I believe there is a law that prohibits foreigners to be part of our vessels flying international route, Mr. President.
How about domestic routes, Mr. President?
Point of correction, Mr. President, I'm sorry. Bawal ang foreigners sa domestic routes
Okay.
ng flagship vessels natin. However, sa international, yung pong vessels carrying Filipino flag, applying international water, hindi po bawal yun. And then, so yung pong foreigner na sakay doon will be protected by the MLC.
Yes, okay. Make sure that he is protected under MLC 2006 because we are a state party. But can we, if we compare now, the same Philippine registered ship, ocean-going vessel. So nabanggit nyo na po, ang source of rights ni foreigner doon ay MLC 2006. Si Filipino, seafarer, on board that Philippine registered ocean-going vessel, ano po ang source of rights niya?
Kasi po, yung kaya nga Magna Carta for Seafarers, this only focused on the rights of the Filipino seafarers. Ibig sabihin, pang-Pilipino lang po talaga, Filipino seafarers. Now, doon po sa foreigner, again, they're covered under the MLC convention. And at the same time, yung mga laws na kung saan siya, sa kanyang nationality, then he or she is protected under that law of that country where he or she belongs, Mr. President.
Sige, si Filipino ship owner naman ang subject nandoon sa laws nung foreigner.
Exactly,
Apo.
Mr. President.
Pero si Filipino seafarer on board Philippine registered domestic ships, ang governing law niya, labor code.
Ang labor code po natin, Mr. President, Your Honor.
And to the extent but to the extent applicable, also the Magna Carta.
That is
Tama
correct.
ba? Because there is actually a chapter for the domestic seafarer.
That is correct. That's why in chapter 14, they have exclusive coverage on this Magna Carta bill, Mr. President, dedicated lamang para sa kanila yung chapter 14 ng bill na ito.
Si cadet, Mr. President, si cadet ay may definition siya rito sa page 3, line 11. Hindi siya seafarer.
Seafarer po, si cadet.
Seafarer na siya.
That is correct.
Even as a cadet.
That is correct, Mr. President. Once na sumampa siya sa barko, considered na po siya as seafarer. Kasi bago siya maging cadet, meron po siyang dadaanan ng mga proseso that will make him and certify him as a seafarer na pwede nang magsampa ng anong klaseng vessel, Mr. President.
So thank you for clarifying that, Mr. President. Basta si cadet, as defined in our definition of terms, is considered a seafarer. That's why mentioned siya sa ating panukala.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Ito pong hindi rin covered na pagdating sa klase ng vessel. Ships of traditional built. Ano po ito, Mr. President?
Okay, yung traditionally made boats, Mr. President, ito yung mga bangka na ginawa dito, yung parang makalumang bangka, yung mga parang galleon boat na pang-exhibit, na parang for purposes of like tourism, para magpasyal-pasyal lang ng mga bisita, etc. Yun po hindi included. Excluded po sila, Mr. President.
Okay, so meron palang ganyan na ocean going, Mr. President. Meron.
Pong mga ships ocean going, Mr. President, na hindi for commercial purposes, kundi for tour and educational purpose na nagagamit po yung ships na yon, and therefore different po ang coverage noon, Mr. President. In charge for that, Mr. President, is the Marina.
So, tapos kung meron talagang ganito mga vessels o barko at hindi to applicable, anong batas po ang applicable sa kanila although they may be ocean going?
Diyan papasok po yung ating labor laws, diyan po yung DOLE.
Labor code.
And then pwede rin po tumulong ang Marina, pwede yung makialam pagdating po doon sa kontrata nila at ma-ensure na compliance po yung may-ari ng vessels doon sa mga rights and privileges nung seafarer, seafarer nandoon sa barkong yon, Mr. President, Your Honor.
So, thank you for that, Mr. President. Pero yung, para klaruhin natin, yung mga cruise ships naman, cruise vessels, o ocean going yon, yung Filipino seafarer doon, on board that cruise ship, na pasyal-pasyal din naman, pero commercial purpose siya, ano pong batas ang go-govern sa kanya?
Yeah, that's different, Mr. President. Yung sa cruise ship, definitely sila po ay considered as seafarer, full-time seafarer na covered po under dito sa Magna Carta Bill, Your Honor, Mr. President.
That's why so critical po yung as may be defined under existing rules and regulations siguro para talagang klaro po kasi
Tama po, Mr. President, Your Honor.
MLC 2006 is just one of the agreements which influence our Magna Carta. There's another one and this is the so-called letter S yung umpisa eh. Ano yun? STCW. And just like my question in MLC 2006, to what extent has the concepts in STCW or provisions been adopted in our Magna Carta, Mr. President?
Yung STCW, Mr. President, Your Honor, yan yung agency na ensures that training and certification and safety of the seafarers must be followed, and curriculum-wise, they're very strict in evaluating and monitoring to ensure compliance, Mr. President, Your Honor.
So we comply with this before we can even talk about seafarers, because this we comply in order to produce our seafarers. Ito pa ba yun?
That is correct, Mr. President.
Naalala ko noon, Mr. President, that the Philippines was warned by the European Union. What did we do, or what have we done? All of a sudden, there is a change in tone in the EU, Mr. President.
That is correct, Mr. President. You're really exactly right. Kasi ang nangyari, Mr. President, marami tayong mga violations since 2006, and then it went up until 2017. So when the EMSA did an inspection dito sa atin, and they saw na marami pa rin tayong mga violations, so therefore they asked us na para to explain, and we did just like that, but hindi nila tinanggap yun. So 2021 they came back, and then when they did another inspection, again we failed. So after that, in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, tama? 2022, we did submit our position paper or our explanation doon sa kanilang pag-issue sa atin ng failed, na meron tayong mga violation, and then we specify the things that we should be doing to improve so that we will be in par with the international standards set forth by the MLC. And so, nung nabasa po nila, Mr. President, yung explanation natin, they said, okay, we will give you extension for your recognition. So, in-extend lang po, Mr. President.
Temporary lang din po, subject to our fulfillment siguro of what we promised that we would do.
Exactly, Mr. President. They might come back in 2 years, 3 years to inspect. We don't know. There's nothing exactly that says there na babalik sila after 2 years or 4 years, 5 years. But what they did is they just gave us an extension. Because doon po sa ating ginawa explanation, we told them na we are in compliant of the MLC 2006, but wala pa silang ginagawang inspection after na in-extend nila yung recognition natin, Mr. President.
Akala ko na napatawad na tayo because of the competent and eloquent representations made by our presiding officer when he went to Brussels, Mr. President. I think this was brought out, Mr. President, in that visit, and our presiding officer defended.
You're 100% correct, Minority Leader.
That is correct, Mr. President, in your honor. Malaking bagay, malaking tulong, Mr. President, yung ginawang representation. Thank you, Mr. President, for that. Totoo yun, Mr. President, gumawa ng manifestation, si Senator Angara, Senator President, even the President of the Philippines. Because of that, yun po ang isa sa mga reason kung bakit nila tayo binigyan ng extension as a courtesy.
Opo. So it's at least klaro sa atin na extension lang pala. I could suspend my interpellation with the permission of our sponsor, Mr. President.
No problem, Mr. President. I'm more than happy and willing to sit down with you and let's help each other out tingnan po natin kung ano pa po yung pwede maidagdag na wala rito na sa tingin niyo po ikagaganda ng bill na ito. So why not? And so be it. Mr. President, Your Honor.